Thank you for joining us today. Glad to have you here. We will go ahead and get started and keep to our 1 hour time frame with an optional session for those of you who would like to stay on and learn a bit more about how to run interactive meetings on Zoom, which is essentially me sharing what lessons I've learned. For those of you who joined early, I was telling the story this morning that the breakout rooms I had created for our meeting today were not uploading to Zoom when I first got online this morning, and I was completely frustrated, and it took me a minute, but I troubleshooted and figured it out. So I went upstairs to check in on my teenagers and said, hey, you don't know this, but this is a cape. I am a superhero. I did something amazing already this morning. And my 13-year-old deadpan looked at me and said, that just means you didn't fail yet today. So that's how my day's going. I hope everybody else is doing well. I will say I have spoken to several counselors over the course of this week as school is starting, and I recognize how challenging this week is for everyone. And just know we're here to elevate and celebrate the work that you do every day, as well as learn from one another. So we recognize that everybody's coming to this meeting with challenging circumstances of one kind or another, and we will provide each other grace and space as we come together today in our Professional Development Institute. So just know we appreciate all that you're doing and recognize you will contribute in as many ways as you can to today's meeting, and we'll all just do our best. So thank you. Go ahead and get started. So our agenda today, I'll do a few housekeeping pieces in a minute. We will get a quick update about St. Louis graduates and the Professional Development Institute, because we have many people who are joining us for the first time today. Since we moved to online Professional Development Institute workshops this school year, amidst the situation that we're all in, we decided that it's a y'all come, right? So as many people as our Zoom license will allow, we will welcome into our workshops. I have learned we have a license that will allow for 300 participants and 200 if we do breakout rooms. And we had 150 people who registered for today's workshop. So I don't know that everybody will be able to join us, but we're encouraged by the opportunity to connect with more people across our state and learn from one another. So thank you. But we'll tell you a little about who we are. We'll take a deep breath. We started incorporating a little bit of mindfulness into our meetings just to give each of us a moment to breathe, remind ourselves to breathe, and new tools in our toolbox in terms of mindfulness. We do interactive check-ins in terms of using breakout rooms just to connect with one another for a brief moment at the beginning of each of our meetings. And then we'll get into the learning. And Gabby Ray from Missouri College Advising Corps has some really great strategic thinking framework for us in terms of virtual engagement. We have some tips and resources to share. And then we will call the wisdom in the room and connect with each other in breakout rooms to document lessons that we've learned in terms of what to do and what not to do in a virtual space. And then we'll learn more about the upcoming MOAC-AC Show Me My Future Virtual College and Career Fair, which is coming up. So, and Michelle Arashi from Pattonville High School and MOAC-AC is here to tell us about that. We will then wrap up the formal part of our workshop today within the hour. For those of you who are interested, I have learned a few things about running Zoom meetings, my earlier story notwithstanding. And I have a brief slide deck I've put together on some tips and strategies on using Zoom for interactive meetings. And I'm happy to share that with you for anybody who's interested after the workshop. And we'll just take about 15, 20 minutes to do that. So, housekeeping. We started with what I think is the most important thing for all of us right now, which is grace and space. There may be children, there may be pets, there may be other interruptions, things that happen as the course of this meeting. It's all good. We'll get through. There are some meeting agreements. Caitlin Venta is organizing chat for us today. Thank you, Caitlin. And Danielle Washington from Wyman is taking some notes so that we'll have them afterwards. Thank you, Danielle. If you'd like to click on the link to our meeting agreements, you can see a Google Doc of just, what we've agreed to in all of our meetings. I'm not going to spend time walking through it in great detail today, but basically just being respectful of one another, learning, remembering to step up and step back. So if you have wisdom, please bring it to the room. We need to hear from you. But if you feel like you just need to step back today, it's okay too. Remain on mute unless you're presenting. Everybody is muted when you first arrive. do what's best for you in terms of whether or not you use video today. If you've got questions or comments or reactions, please use the chat function. A reminder that this session is being recorded. I will say, because a lot of our work will be in breakout rooms don't get recorded, and so the video will only be so helpful after today, but we will post it, and the notes actually are probably going to be much more helpful today. Just note in chat that if you privately chat with another person, that's fine to do, but we end up seeing it when we get the chat log, and then we try to call it before we post the notes, but lesson learned for all of us. And a survey will come to your email that we hope you will take a minute to complete. So my colleague, Trent Ball, who's one of the co-chairs of St. Louis Graduates, Trent is with Southeast Missouri State University, was going to join us this morning to give us a quick update on who we are and what we do. And like all of us, got called into a meeting he didn't know about until about 9:45. So welcome to our world. I'm going to pitch it, but for those of you who are less familiar with our work, the short version is that St. Louis Graduates is a network of K-12 and higher education, youth-serving nonprofit organizations, business and philanthropy, all focused on eliminating equity gaps for students in post-secondary degree completion. We work specifically to focus on low-income students and Black students. The Professional Development Institute is our way of building counselor capacity to help advise students on post-secondary plans, and we open it to those who would work with all students across Missouri and Southern Illinois. So while PDI is one important part of our work, it's not the only thing that we do. Another thing, just to let you know about, is we, as of November, have formed a network of 14 and growing college teams across the state of Missouri and Southern Illinois, all working on student success once enrolled in college, because none of us want to see a situation where a student enrolls and is unable to complete, and even worse, leaves with some debt, but not the benefit of having completed a degree. And we also launched in July a new video series called Degrees with Less Debt. The first episode aired in July, and it's on our YouTube channel. And we will post the link for how to see that. The second one in the series is on affordability issues, and that will air September the 30th. And then we've got another one still planned this year. It's basically students and professionals all talking about how do we support students and increase post-secondary completion. And I just should point out too, I say college, we say college, but what we mean is post-secondary education and training that leads to a meaningful certification, or a degree, because we recognize that in today's world, 2/3 of all jobs require training beyond high school, and students should be able to earn a credential of some kind that has value for them in terms of the economic stability and mobility of their family. I mentioned PDI our goal is to help students make informed decisions, and to also build a peer network of colleagues from across the community and across the state and Southern Illinois. And so that's an important part of our work, and that's why these workshops are not just webinars, but they are designed to be interactive, because part of it is we want to start building relationships with one another. And hopefully you'll feel that you can reach out to colleagues when you have questions and learn from one another that way as well. We're now in our 11th year, so for those of you who've been coming for a while, it's hard to believe it's been that long, but it has been. We have workshops planned every other Friday this fall. Lots of topics there. We are really pleased to partner with the Missouri Association of Student Financial Aid Personnel on a series of financial aid workshops, and invite you to join us for any of the workshops that would help you better support your students. So the PowerPoint that Caitlin posted that has the agenda also has hyperlinks, but you can also find all of these links on our website. We will be having workshops again in the spring, and we will post more information about that shortly. And just want to point out that all of this is possible because we receive support from Norman J. Stupp Foundation, Commerce Bank trustee, and we are grateful. So you've been listening to me for a moment, but now we're all going to take a moment to pause, because recognizing how challenging this week has been, and that we are just beginning, right? So we like to always just take a brief moment and focus on taking a breath or exercising a moment of mindfulness. So the tool I'm bringing into our space today is one we use for those of you who were involved in our workshops in the spring. It's called box breathing, and some of you may use this with your students all the time anyway, but it's just a way of controlling your breath and controlling your mind, so that if something is upsetting or things are getting to you, you can just kind of center yourself and then really start to focus on the work at hand. The box breathing tool is fairly straightforward. You breathe in deeply for 4 counts, hold it for 4, exhale intentionally and deeply for 4, and then hold it again for 4. And ideally you do it 4 times. This morning we will just do it once, but just give ourselves a brief moment to kind of breathe and relax as we enter into our learning. So you can do it with me if you like, but just breathe in, hold it for 4, exhale for 4, and hold it for 4. Okay, hopefully that feels like a little bit of a reset button. So thank you. So as I mentioned, we do like to try and connect with one another. Just to get us started, we think it's really helpful to check in with another person, maybe 2, and just see how another person is doing right now. So I think we're there. So welcome back. Really glad to be joined by my colleague, Gabby Ray Robinson from Missouri College Advising Corps today. The College Advising Corps has a guide that they've developed on advising in a virtual space and engagement in a virtual space. And Gabby has some really terrific lessons learned. And then we've also got some resources that we culled from some of the literature and resources we found online. So Gabby, can I turn it over to you?
Yes, you definitely can. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad it's Friday. Hopefully you all are too. But I will go and just kind of dive right on in. So very similar to what Laura already said, this is a little snippet of the virtual advising guide that the College Advising Corps, CAC is what we like to call it, has kind of put together for us. And this is kind of like their beginning stages of like how to get started with virtually advising, which is kind of where we all are at the moment. And so just to kick it right off, one of the main things that they like to start with is kind of why do we do what we do? And so thinking about that concept and just kind of, you know, for lack of better words, just kind of your why, can kind of get lost when you are in face-to-face meetings with students or in-person meetings when you're in the building. It's not brought to the forefront as much, but I do believe that now in this virtual space, it's a great time for us to kind of review that why and what the purpose is of what it is that we're doing when it comes to supporting students. And so another thing with the CAC when it comes to the why is, well, really not even just CAC, just in general, we know that being in this virtual space with students is very different, and our time for them to kind of have that, or their attention spans, if you will, may not be the greatest. And so the time that we have with them can be very limited, but one question to kind of ask yourself when you are finally in front of that student or you are interacting with them in a virtual space is, do they see or feel your why? Do they know that you want to support them or that you're passionate about them succeeding? And kind of keeping that in your own mind as you are interacting with students and meeting with them virtually, to make sure that you are doing and saying things that are able to kind of not promote, but almost allow them to kind of see that you do care. And so we want to make sure that we're getting that across to all students while we are presenting to them or engaging with them in a virtual space. And then moving on down to the how and what will be delivered. And so here, this can kind of be broken up into different areas. And so the one thing that you really want to focus on is how are we reaching out to students? What does that look like? What technology, what communication platforms is the school allowing you all to use? And then with that, what does that look like when you are reaching out to students? Another thing that CAC likes to kind of hit on as well when it comes to how and what is being delivered from a communication standpoint would also be how are we as staff members, as counselors, as folks that are working within the schools, how are we communicating with each other? What are we doing to make sure that our internal communication is flowing and it's continuing on in the midst of what's going on when it comes to students? And so while it's important to kind of factor in how we're reaching out to students on a day-to-day basis, it's also important to kind of see how we're communicating with each other internally as well. And so that's something to keep in mind there. Moving into the student information systems. And so all school districts have some way in which they track data or information when it comes to students. And so making sure that you all are obviously up to date with those things, but then seeing them as tools to kind of help you track what's going on with students. So are we seeing certain trends when it comes to us interacting with students in a virtual space? And if that is the case, what is it that we may need to do to readjust or just to adjust in general our teaching style or the way in which we're presenting information to students to best support them and the needs that they have in that space? And so keeping that in mind as well when it comes to the information that we're gathering from students. It's great to get this stuff from them, but what are we doing with it at the end of the day? How are we using it to our benefit is one thing to definitely consider here. And then moving on to the plan of attack, which is like my favorite piece of it because I love to execute. I love to see it through. But here, the one thing that we have to keep in mind and be really intentional about is making sure that the structure that we are using in which to give students this information is super, or that we're super intentional with it so that we are giving the students the information that they need at the right time and in a way that allows them to kind of do what it is that we want. So if that ending result is we need them to accomplish something or we need them to complete a task, we need to make sure that the way that we are structuring not only our communication, but our information to them will end in that result. We'll have that ending result. So any actions that we need them to complete, anything of that nature, whatever it is that we want them to do, we need to make sure that we are being intentional about the structure in which we're giving the information so that they can then understand that this is what we are wanting to receive from them at the end of the day. And so all of those things are really, really, really important. And then moving on down into the goals and kind of what goals we measure or what goals will measure the impact that we're having or that is being had in this virtual space. We want to make sure that we are, I guess we all understand that normally in a school year, you know, we have goals that we want to meet, but making sure that we are adjusting those goals because obviously a normal school year looks a lot different than a pandemic school year, if you will. And so are we adjusting those goals that are to make them realistic for this time frame, or not time frame, but this space that we're in time? So are they conducive for a virtual environment? Are we putting too much on ourselves? Are we not allowing grace with our students because of what's going on? Are we still in this same normal school year mindset? Is that what's happening? And so kind of taking a step back and reflecting on that and seeing where we are and how do we need to readjust to kind of fit the situation that we're in currently with being in this virtual space. And so in my mind, the goals section is kind of like the overarching, the umbrella, if you will, but then we kind of scale that in just a little bit when it comes to the milestones. And so with CAC, they use milestones as like programmatic expectations. And so what is it that we are trying to measure and what is it that we have in place that we think or we know, or we hope, I guess I should say, that will help us achieve those goals. And so making sure that you all, if you know, and again, the language can look very different within your schools or within your counseling, you know, department or what have you, but having those milestones, you know, those kind of, for lack of better words, those smaller chunks that you can kind of bite off bit by bit to help you reach those goals are always really, really helpful. And then if we even scale it down just a bit more, going into benchmarks, those benchmarks per CAC are more so in place to kind of give you a target to aim for. And so those are taking those milestones and breaking those down even further. And so what are those benchmarks that you have that will lead you to those milestones that will eventually get you to those goals at the end of the day? And so I know that was super duper fast, but that's kind of like a very, very basic, very beginner level kind of concept that CAC uses in getting started with virtually advising to kind of help them kind of move forward. And so, yeah.
Thank
I don't
you.
know, are there any questions? I don't know, should I ask for questions now?
Sure, if there are questions now, you can put them in the chat and we'll make sure that Gabi, so this is sort of the framework, and then we're going to move into maybe the strategic and tactical level.
Cool beans.
No questions so far in the chat, but we have one school who's looking for a college advisor. So if you'll reach out to Garen, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. They're looking for an advisor, I believe at St. Clair High School. So if you know anybody looking for a job, they're looking for somebody there.
We are working on it. I will tell you that right now, Jaren. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. We are working on it. We know that St. Clair needs somebody. We're getting somebody there. I promise you that. We were interviewing this week, so it's coming. I promise. Okay, and so here, this slide is a bit more in depth, not as broad as kind of like the framework, but this one just has a lot of different virtual engagement tips that you all can kind of read through. And again, the PowerPoint is linked in the chat, and so I won't go through all of them, but the main thing that I can tell you all with being in this space is just to be super duper intentional about what you do. Be super intentional about the way in which you're communicating with students and families. And not only being intentional about the communication, but the way in which you communicate with them. Also making sure to not forget all students. And so, you know, I know that sometimes it can be a little different when it comes to like our ELL students or our students that have IEPs or 504s, but making sure that they have the support that they need in this space as well is super duper important. The last thing we want to do is to, you know, look over a student unnecessarily. And so we want to make sure to do that. And then another big thing, and I'm sure I have a few folks on my team that are on the call today, but asking for feedback. Wanting to know exactly how things are going. What does this look like for you? What are we doing well? What needs to be adjusted? How can we improve? Always asking those questions to students and to families just to ensure that we are being as much of a benefit to them as we can be. And that's really essentially how we're going to become better with this and kind of as we navigate this virtual space, that will be super duper helpful getting feedback from students and families for sure. See, I think that, yeah. I don't know, Laura, you have anything to add there?
No.
Okay. And so here, there's just a few kind of ways in which you can become very visible to students, which I think is brilliant. And so for some schools, I do know that you all have kind of hooked it up with the teachers to where you're able to get into those classrooms or those homerooms, if you will, to kind of present yourself. If you have that opportunity, go for it. If you have developed those relationships with teachers, and they will allow you to do that, you know, take up the first 5 minutes or so in the classroom, go for it. For those that may not have that same opportunity to do as such, most schools have some type of newsletter or a website or something, a homepage, something of the sort to where you can put together some super sweet, super cute video just introducing yourself to the students and the families, just so that they know who you are. And if not a video, then a really nice picture along with like a short description of what you do. That's something else that can go right on that homepage or in that e-newsletter, whichever works for you or whichever you have access to that you're able to do. And then also, given the permission of your schools, making some type of social media presence known to your students, to your staff, to your families within the school district, just making sure that they know how to reach you, how to get in touch with you if they ever need anything. I've seen so many good things from advisors as far as in the spring when we were doing like decision day and those types of things, and those things had to be turned into a virtual event, the way that they were just celebrating students, and they were doing that on different social media platforms, and it was just really nice. And I know a lot of students really appreciated being showcased like that. And so this is a time, and I've told this to my team as well, this is a time for us to get creative. It's very easy for us to get stuck into this, I don't know how to do this, I've never done this before, this is difficult, this is hard. This is a time for us to think outside of the box on how we can reach students and still make them feel special and support them all in the same go round. So yes, yes, yes. Oh, and then a few other tech tools here that you all can use. I'm sure you all are familiar with a few of these. I know I definitely am. The Class Dojo, that was a new one for me. I hadn't heard of that one before. But I know that these are tried and true here. But if you all have any additional ones, like it says here on the slide, feel free to put those into the chat. I'd love to know new ones to offer up to my advisors and anyone else looking for new ways in which to communicate with students online. So yeah, here's a few here.
All right. And then just here are some resources that I've collected as links that wanted to share with everyone. Thank you, Gabi, so much for sharing that wisdom with us in terms of strategy and tactics. So these are clickable links on your PDF. And then also just a reminder that we have a COVID-19 resource page on the St. Louis Graduates website, where I'm continually updating with additional resources, links to webinars, any updates that I get. So if you have updates that I can post and share with others, that just send them to me in an email and I'll make sure they get up. And then that's a good place to go if you're trying to find out, you know, if I've seen it, I've posted it. So, okay. Caitlin, anything in the chat we need to bring into the room before we transition? Okay. So here's the plan.